Today's guest is a near-death experiencer, regression therapist, and a reiki healer from New York State in the US. He specialises in past life regression therapy and as a psychotherapist incorporates mindfulness and a spiritual approach to focus on the connection between mind, body and spirit. Please give a huge Koit welcome to Jacob Cooper. Hi Jacob and welcome to KoitCast.
It's an honor to be here, Paul. Thank you so much for having me on as your guest.
No worries, it's an honour for me too, so much appreciated for your time. Let's start with the old classic. Who are you? Where are you from, etc.?
Well, my name is Jacob Cooper. I'm from, a place called Long Island in New York, not too far from New York City. And who am I is a question that I try to redefine at each day. But, essentially I'm someone who hopefully will leave this world in a better place than when I walked in. And that's what I try to do each and every day. But professionally, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I provide, mental health therapy to clients. I speak throughout the world, different subjects from hypnosis to mental health, and also talking about, spiritual experiences too. And I'm the author of 2 different books, Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. So those are the things that I do. In terms of my inner being, hopefully we'll find ways to express that in different ways. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, those are lovely sentiments in there that you'll work at being better. Now, not many people would say that as their first answer to the question. So well played you, on the path towards the goal.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes visit my grandfather's tombstone, and on it said, he left this world a better place than when he came in. And so I think when people ask, like, what's the measurement of a life? What's the receipt of a life? It's not so much what we get, but rather what could we say is definitively different from our existence. And when we're here, we certainly don't know. We have a very minuscule idea of how large of an impact that we have, but we come from a place of integrity, of service, of just connectivity. We really can make a big impact.
Hell yeah. Now, knowing that, right, we can take nothing with us. We come in naked, we leave naked. We come in with nothing, we leave with nothing. Why is the earth and the people there on it, always chasing this, the money, the power, the fame? Why?
I think there's a lot of influence in our beliefs and our behaviors. And so I think, when people are able to look at themselves and point to themselves as just the body, and that's all that they are is physical, then you want more of those things. And that's how you define yourself. And you see that this is all that there is, and I'm going to look out for this body, this name, this ego, and that's all that I am in this box. And so it's not just money, but it's egocentric way to live. Now, if you see yourself just beyond the body and there's an interconnectivity to yourself and other inhabitants, all of a sudden you understand that, hey, that person's success is our success. And this doesn't work until that person's working, that person's working. I could have it good, but if that person's hurting, it's not good. Much like in the body, you could have every part working, but if you have a kidney that's not working, a liver that's not working, the body will be out of whack. So I think when people are able to broaden how they see themselves just beyond their ego, beyond this box, and see themselves from a broader perspective, that will matter. But yes, beliefs are so much in behaviors, and from an early onset, we're taught attainment is our own doing defines our own being. What we do, who we are, our accolades, our cars, our homes defines who we are. Instead of understanding that we are enough just as we are, and we could express that beauty to the world, we don't have to do something to become something. We already are a masterpiece within, as we are divine, infinite beings having this experience.
And I agree with those sentiments, by the way, and I wholeheartedly understand them. How do we click people out of the mindset or the scenario where we're all on this egocentric journey?
Egocentric based journey.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people have a hard time with change. As I said, the devil that you know instead of the devil that you don't know. So they're kind of stuck in many ways. And to me, a lot of people just are kind of walking zombies. They're not really living. They're not really connected. They're just very stale. But you have to really understand, what is real living? What does life mean? The term life, it means something to generate, to give to continue, to broaden. And so I think for people, it's just, you could be like one or two people. You could be like that stale body of water where people walk by it. It has like an off-putting odor. There's no movement and you don't want to be there. Or you could be just this beautiful kind of like waterfall. It's just constantly rejuvenating itself and replenishing itself. And there's a continual progression. And I think some people just get very stagnant, complacent with who they are. But beyond that, the fear of change, people will be more comfortable in an unhealthy, unproductive comfort zone than a healthy zone to be in. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But I think the vulnerability of being open to change is a first step, and a lot of people lack, that capacity or that drive. And there are many factors that could contribute to that. I think for people, they'll look at challenges as just a fatal blow, and that's it, and life's terrible. But in many ways, challenges could be those shakeups of our lives that get us to rethink things, to reframe things, to look at things in a different way. And if we're so comfortable, it leads to complacency. So I think sometimes people have to listen to the challenges and crises that come, with life, because those could be really wake-up calls to get us to take a step back, to really evolve and move forward from that moment. So I think really the biggest thing is being vulnerable, but also being aware of some challenges and not having them define us, but having them with the capacity to redefine our lives.
Do you know what you made me think of there, which is it's almost like an addiction. I realized that being stuck in the everyday 9 to 5 mindset of getting worth money is like addiction, in that in order to get out of it and to get onto the betterment of yourself and for humanity, etc., you need to understand the problem and then make that choice, don't you, to switch. But that brave choice.
I mean, yeah, the first step in the problem is identifying one, whether that's an addiction, whether that's a mental health condition. You first have to be able to have the awareness to identify it as such, and then the humble capacity to be able to ground yourself, humble yourself, to work on that problem and go to the wound of your dysfunction. So, yeah, but I think the first step is awareness, is identification. Carl Jung was a famous psychoanalysis, like I think when was he, in the late 1800s, early 1900s probably. And he speaks a lot of what we're discussing today, which, there's two phases that people get into, or two phases of life that people are involved with, which is the morning of life, which is everything that you've been taught, you've been told to do. You start to follow that script, and it's just about the chasing, the attainment, all those things of the ego. Then once you get to the afternoon, you're like, geez, I'm tired of this. This isn't working.
Yeah.
And then you get to the afternoon of life where you are more selective, where you're focused more on, mindfulness of life, just the essence of life, the beauty of life. It's more of an emphasis on, what are some things that I could experience, that will have lasting effects, versus this just a continual rush of chasing something that will never bring me what I'm looking for. And that's often referred to as a midlife crisis, where, you follow every box off the checklist, and you get to a certain point where you just are like, geez, this is not working. Whatever people told me is not giving me happiness. And you have to ask yourself why. And I think in many ways, happiness is not started outside of yourself. It's found within, and then expressed and experienced through the outer world. But when there's not a good connection within, there's dependence and reliance on almost escapism, because you're so miserable with yourself that you need that high to get you up. But like you said, it is like a drug to escape or to just alleviate your own inner misery.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people listening to this will understand that point is like a midlife crisis. There's no fulfillment for a lot of people in the day-to-day grind and getting nowhere, actually the fulfillment is in the joy of life and the connections you've made, and then realizing you want to do something you want to do, not what you should do. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? That people put on
Yeah.
you, you should do this.
Doesn't make sense to continue to do what you don't like doing for the sake of doing what you don't like doing. I
Yes.
mean, that's just like a continual cycle of doing what you don't like doing for the sake of doing what you don't like doing. And so, yeah, I think there's a certain point where people are just get to a point where like, what's the point of this? What's the point? And I think for a lot of people, there's been a big reevaluation, at least in the States, of people. We call it kind of like the mass exodus or the mass exit, where people are now just starting to leave jobs and starting to find things that are more meaningful, valuable. And obviously, with the advancement of the internet, social media, a lot of people are finding more creative ways to generate income versus just the
Mm.
traditional model of working for someone. More people are able to do their own thing.
Yeah, I think COVID had a lot to play in that as well, didn't it? In that was the jolt we needed to push a lot of people into different directions.
Right.
So that was a win.
There's a lot of things, but I think really life depends on your foundation. I mean, COVID could have been looked at, depending on where you were in the boat on the storm, a great crisis, but particularly for people who lost loved ones very abruptly, or they have lingering, health impacts from
Yeah.
it, so that part is very real and visceral. But on the other hand, there was also a double-edged sword where there was a great transformation that people could experience from it. And so I think, there's a term that's thrown out a lot, which is just mindfulness, or being mindful. And so I could rob a bank and be mindful. I could be aware of what I'm doing, and that's mindfulness.
How many
But
times have you done that, Jacob?
no, I'm just saying, I give a hypothetical. I'd be a lot wealthier than I am today if that were the case. But I mean, I wouldn't. But that could be mindfulness. So I think really mindfulness has to be rooted in compassion, wisdom, empathy, all those things, not just awareness, like people say, not just presence, but the foundational core of it, really needs to be rooted in a lot of the deeper spiritual practices
Mm.
that connect us to beyond the self.
Now, you mentioned spiritual there, and I think this is probably a healthy link into your first book or one of your books. You wrote Life After Breath, How a Brush with Fatality Gave Me a Glimpse of Immortality, all
Right.
about your near-death experience. Could you tell us the story of this event, what happened, what you saw, and then what you learned?
Yeah, my first book, Life After Breath, was published right in the heat of COVID. Again, there was obviously a big lockdown, and I said, geez, instead of tuning into the news, driving myself crazy, why don't I just get into my muse, get myself on lockdown, and just kind of focus on something that could generate the hope past the pain and to give people something that they could hold on to instead of kind of regenerating all this neurosis and anxiety that's not really adding anything. So I decided to not be a leaf in water, and I decided to generate a current within that time frame. And the book has been on Amazon #1 best-selling in its category, several months, and it's doing quite well. But Life After Breath, really, the title explains a little bit. I had a near-death experience as a result of suffocation, so that's where the title Life After Breath comes
Ah,
from. Instead of life after, it was really a homage to Raymond Moody, who's a good friend of mine who coined the term the near-death experience in the mid-70s. But Life After Breath was a homage to his life after life. So
yeah,
um,
yeah.
that's kind of like a play on his, and out of respect to him. But instead of death, I wrote breath. But really, at the time, I was just 3 years old, contracted pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough,
Oh,
went to a playground, completely suffocated, no life whatsoever, body shut down, brain shut down, and I experienced, the incredibly profound mystical experience of a near-death experiencer, beyond the physical, incredible trauma and distress, and so I was able to really see all that's around us at all times, that sometimes we just forget is connected to us on this journey.
Well, here's a question for you then, right? Obviously, well, not obviously, but in a lot of the cases or people you speak to, they'll say, I had a near death experience when I was 15, when I was 25, when I was 40, whatever.
Right.
You've had yours at 3. So a couple of questions come to mind. When you're in that experience, is your mind that of a 3-year-old, or are you not in that? You're back to your normal inner self?
It's a good question, Paul. What I'll say is this. Um, we are infinite spiritual beings having this human experience. So, but what that means is we are not what we think we are. We're temporarily having these human experiences. As Jacob, right now I'm 33 years old. You're, however, whatever your age, but that's just an experience. That's not the full totality of who you are. Beyond this experience is an infinite soul, that is knowing. And so when we look at kids, sometimes there's an associative perspective that the body is who they are. And so if they're physically youthful, then they must be very shallow in their thinking and not thinking anything or not connected. But there's a whole soul within this being of this child. And kids really are not in congruency with what they know on an inner level with how they're able to portray it and express it. And that takes time. It's like getting yourself like a brand new guitar and getting yourself acclimated to it. And so the takes time for the soul and the instrument to really be in unison. And so what I'll say to that is no kid is exactly a kid. On one level, yes, they are. But on another level, that kid could be like an ancient being. And just because they're presenting, talking in Google Gaga or very limited vocabulary, does not mean that there's a deep wisdom that goes far beyond just what you're seeing. And so this ties into past lives theory, which I do believe is incredibly valid. You could certainly check out a lot of the evidential archives, particularly over here in the States. We have the University of Virginia that has evidential past life encounters, particularly that are relevant in children, because children, when you think about it, they're coming just from heaven, from the other side. They're not as amnesic or forgetful, and they're able to have a lot of these clear memories. So in many ways, the young are old, and the old could be
Mm.
young because the young in many ways have all these connection. They're not as programmed or filtered, and they have a deep and spiritual connection oftentimes to less barriers of forgetfulness, and sometimes that's lost, as you get turn 5 or 6, whatever. But some retain it for whatever reason. And so having my near-death experience, that yes, there was a part of me that was connected to my 3-year-old self and my parents and the life that I live. But beyond that, this was experienced by my soul, which all of life really is experienced. So it wasn't, all that different. My awareness of my surroundings was different. It was a lot broader than this reality.
Mm. So what did you see?
Well, here's what, when you say the word see or visual, here's what I'll say. Our understanding of visual color per se is largely based on the spectrum of the sun. All our colors are
Mm.
really just limited by the spectrum of the sun. And so that's what we have to work with. And so when I had my near-death experience, I was beyond the physical, and the sights that I was seeing are not of this planet, are not of this earth, meaning the colors that I was looking at had a personality and energy to them, a symphony to them. It's not like you just look at the color red that I'm wearing and just see red.
Mm.
There's a whole life to that color, and the colors are much different over there than over here. But I really was able to see, in particular, my guardian angels, which we call, at least in the West, spirit guides, but some people in other parts of the world call guardian angels, which are beings that you are connected to before you come here. It's oftentimes they chose you, and or at times you gravitate to them. There's a connection with you and your own guardian angels or spirit guides that goes far beyond this lifetime. And they're there with you in the pre-birth phase. They help you chart this life and plan this life, and they're there with you every step of the way. So these are really your primary guides that are there before you're born, and they'll be there with you after you leave. So I had a connection with the male and female guide that were with me. I saw, as you see behind me, I'd have an angel. I saw an infinite amount of angels that were just floating right in front of me, all around me. And these angels are quite youthful and young looking, and they were literally right in front of me. I was able to see my own, what we call as, spiritual family or soul family, which we are connected to on the other side. It's kind of like we're all just a part of one big soul family here on Earth and beyond, but there's more of a nuclear connection that we have on the other side. And, I just saw also a life review, like flashing imagery of the life that I lived in this lifetime, but also different past life memories that I experienced, as well as premonitions of what I would be doing in this life and of this life. So there's a lot in a Life After Breath. I chronicle a bit more information. But I would say is in our body, in this reality, we have a certain apex of the highest and greatest good, just the ultimate climactical experience. And when you go to heaven, there's no possible limitation with how euphoric and good you feel. There's no limit to that. And just imagine that for a second. There's no limitation of time. There was no limitation.
I can't imagine it. That's the thing. For layman people or people who haven't gone through your experience, there's two things we can't think of. Imagine is that heaven place and
Yeah.
ultimate awesomeness. And secondly, you mentioned the colours thing. It's almost impossible for me to reconcile in my head a different colour than what the colours we have. I understand what you're saying and it makes sense and I can grasp the concept, but I can never visualize it properly because I've never seen it. Do you know what I
Well,
mean?
I hear you, but what I'll say is people are coming to listen to near-death experiencers more and more now than ever. And there's many reasons. I think obviously channels like yours and it's being mainstream and the internet is allowing it to be a lot more of a mainstream phenomenon. But you have to ask yourself why. What is drawing so many people to have so much curiosity in what I and so many people have to say? And many theories behind it, but to me at least, there's something familiar about what an authentic, real, evidential near-death experience has and the invocation of a particular memory that the listener has that draws them in. And so, yes, in one way, there's a part of us that can't process this as the linear mind can't understand the nonlinear, just
Mm.
we have to, in order to understand reality, it's really largely based off of our vantage point. Much like if I'm on the first floor of an apartment, I can maybe see the trees and the shrubs and the grass, and that's my viewpoint. I get up to the 10 or 15th floor, I could probably see a lot more of the town and have a higher awareness. So
Mm.
as people connect deeper and start to use more of their inner powers and awareness and gifts within and intuitive capabilities, there's less barriers with what I'll be discussing as something that's outside of people, but more so something that people are able to remember in themselves and experience simultaneously as I talk.
You mentioned obviously a lot of people are coming to these stories, and I agree with you. I mean, there were some Facebook groups I located not long back, and they've got
Right.
millions of people, and there's so many people are sharing their stories. So not only is there a thirst for this content, but also it's surprising how many people are actually having these NDEs, which is surprising, big time surprising, by the way.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why? I mean, I don't know if you can answer it, but why are so many people having near-death experiences?
There's many reasons. I do think the advancement of medicine has allowed, the incubational period between life and death to extend to a degree. But a lot of near-death experiencers of having these miraculous experiences that their own medical team can't possibly justify. I mean, I think of people like someone who endorsed my first book, Anita Marjani. I mean, she wrote the book Dying to Be Me, and she had her family coming in from Hong Kong. They were about to pull the plug, and she had her near-death experience and was able to heal her own cancer from
Whoa.
just this higher vantage point. And and certainly we understand the mind-body connection, but then when someone's basically terminal means terminal. And so not only did she heal her own cancer, but she also experienced the understanding that we don't die. So in this life, once we think something is terminal, there's a way, for us to heal it if that's in the cards for us in a way, because the mind is a great way to keep us in prison, or it could also be a great liberator, if we will. And so, so much of medicine isn't just what the doctor does to you, but our permission and ability to really heal and move a lot of our own cells and stuff like that. But in terms of the occurrence, I mean, I read, almost like 10 to 15% of people are having these experiences. And I would argue that's probably more. I just interviewed someone today who had a near-death experience. She was clinically dead for 37 seconds, didn't remember what happened to her. She went to someone like myself, she went to a hypnotherapist, she was regressed, and she was able to remember fully, loud and clear, her NDE. But not only that, there was evidence behind it, everything that she saw in the hospital, the conversations that were happening. And so this was an evidential testimonial, it wasn't just wishful thinking or whatever. And so I think not everyone remembers their near-death experience. And so to me, that 10 to 15% is probably even larger.
Hmm.
But I also think from a larger spiritual perspective, I think NDEs have been around for thousands of years. I know there, mentions them in the Bible. Greek philosophers such as Plato, referred to it, and they've been around throughout time. That's nothing new. But more people are able to identify this term. There's more of an understanding of it. But also, I think there's more of a readiness for humanity to be open to this stuff. Um, there's more of an openness for people to come forward with the experience because of the destigmatization of this. And so what I try to do, I am in a unique position because I'm a therapist and I'm also a near-death experiencer. And so I know what it's like to be drowning and trying to look for something to hold on to. And that thing that you're looking onto just forces you even further in the water by dismissing what you have, or bypassing what you have, or gaslighting you, or just thinking that you're crazier than what you think. And so, as professionals working in the medical community and mental health community, it's a big onus of responsibility, to be people who build up, who allow people to be empowered, not put people down and just dismiss. That's the last thing I want to do. So I train a lot of therapists, and now medical providers, and really understanding these things because these are things that are occurring more and more. And if you're able to be in that position and give a possibility that this is that, just imagine that life change and imagine all those impacted from that life change.
Then that makes me theorize that you had your NDE to give you the experience of that fact of that thingy happening so
Right.
that you could then do this later on down the line and teach these people that this thing is real and broaden more minds.
Definitely a part of it. Definitely a part of it. I mean, beyond that, I mean, I can't say anything's definite. I think there's a lot
Hmm.
of pieces, but I know in my last lifetime, and I've had this read through evidentially through a lot of different intuitives prior to me ever becoming public or saying a word, pick up on exactly what I saw, where in my last lifetime, I saw my near-death experience and subsequently hundreds of times as a kid where I took my own life, where I completed suicide. And I had this kind of sensation that my back was against the wall. There was no hope. I felt that same degree of suffocation that I felt in my near-death experience. And I think from completion we begin. And so I was having my near-death experience and I was in that same exact feeling where the walls were caving onto me. There was no hope. But this time I decided, instead of trying to resist what was, I allowed myself to surrender to a breath beyond a breath of eternity, as I call it, hinted in my book, Life After Breath. And so when I lost my physical breath, I surrendered to the breath of eternity, and that allowed me, to rise above this experience, to continue to have continuity. And, with Alcoholics Anonymous, they call it the serenity prayer, like let go, let God. When people are in crises, they often just hold on to this. But through the power of surrender is when we really are able to get our power back. And so right now I work with high levels of acuity within the mental health system of clients who, may be on different spectrums, some higher, some lower, but some degree are dealing with self-harm behavior, suicidality, And so I think it's a lot of my karmic work that I have in this position. Um, but I think that's also inspired me to get into the mental health field from having what I had, my near-death experience, when my life was taken, to now be in the position to hopefully try to allow people to get their lives back, to
Mm.
give back what I was given in my near-death experience.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you came to some understanding, which is helping now. That's what it sounds like to me. Um, One more question about what you saw. You mentioned the angels. Now, this is a cheeky question, but I'll ask it anyway.
Yeah.
You've obviously got the angel behind you with the wings. Did
Yeah.
the angels you saw have wings, or are they just beings that you knew were angels?
No, they did.
They did have wings.
Definitely the angels had wings that I saw. You know, when we think of art, in authentic art, it comes from a creative point of our brain, and that brain really is connected to a true and real place. I experienced this in my near-death experience where once my brain literally snapped in half due to the deprivation of oxygen, my awareness exploded, and that's when, I was able to cross over by surrendering
Mm.
to this awareness. And so to me, the brain is just merely a filter between this world and the higher realms. And so when you look at artists, for instance, plenty of them have near-death experiences, or sometimes they have TBIs, and all of a sudden they develop this
So what's TBIs?
traumatic brain injury.
Ah, okay.
And oftentimes they develop something called a savant syndrome, where they could, play incredible music, or they're able to paint, and really it's a brain thing. There's a part of your brain that's opened, to these higher realms. And so that's really what I understand. And so when you look at these artists who draw these angels, to me, their brains are clear filters and clear channels between the higher upper realms and this realm. And so it's not exactly, depicted, as what I had in my near-death experience and seeing the angels, but some of the art that you see in churches on the ceilings and stuff like that is not that far from what I saw, where the spirit guides had more distinct uniform. They weren't uniformal in their presentation. They were more different. They were their own persona. The angels that I saw are very uniformal. They weren't. I couldn't tell one from the other. They just looked exactly the same. Whereas my guardian angels, I could tell that they had a gender. I could tell that they had different names. There's this distinction between one and two. The only detail in my near-death experience that I'm not 100% certain of is my spirit guides' names. Today I just call them the guides. But in the moment, I knew their exact names. Why I forget that, I don't know. But that's
Mm.
the only detail that I sometimes get it to me and it comes to me clearer than others. But having my near-death experience, I knew right then and there, their names. And hopefully that's the one thing I'm looking forward to when I do cross over, is knowing for
Knowing
certain
them again.
their
Yeah.
names, because I've had people come up to me and said, "Oh, your spirit guide's name is Abraham, is this, it's that." I'm like, that might be a guide, but that's not my
Mm.
own, primary spirit guide's name that I saw. Yeah.
It was one of the questions that you did generate in my mind was I wonder if you knew their names, and then it throws open you not remembering or you finding out and keep losing that memory of the name. I wonder if it's information that you can't have here for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know sometimes why we remember certain things, why we don't. Um, I think it would be, and sometimes there's a faith component to this life. Like, what's the point of being here if we're seeing everything loud and clear all the time? That's just heaven to me. I think part of this life is that we have, just kind of like blinders sometimes in our awareness, and we're able to go forward with faith. I think that leads to a lot of growth in this life. We don't have all the answers in front of us. We don't have it all spelled out in front of us. We have an idea, but we walk forward with, somewhat uncertainty, but we trust, in certainty more than uncertainty, and that's what causes us to propel forward in our lives.
Hmm. I think there's a lot to be said for mystery as well. It's what seems to drive our character and drive us forward, into the unknown.
The
That's certainly what
enigma,
I think on a human level, anyway.
yeah, the enigma, the ambiguity, all those things
Hmm.
cause us to move forward. And again, curiosity brings a lot of growth. That's how we start to find more solutions, ask more questions, and
Yeah.
we're able to grow and evolve on our journeys through that seed of curiosity.
Okay, so coming back from your experience, two things again. There's always two questions with me. Because you were three when you came back, because you were three when you crossed
Right.
over essentially, and when you got there, you learned or knew a lot more. What did you bring back of that knowledge with you? And could then the 3 year old of you reconcile it? And secondly, did you come back with any new gifts or skills? Now that might be a hard one to answer because you were only three. You might not know
Right.
what skills you had prior.
Right. Well, it's not like, for myself, definitely intuition was incredibly skyrocketed after this experience. And I do think, having what I had to my brain and my body and crossing over to their side, I came back with a lot of gifts. As my filter was a lot more cleared out and my connectivity wasn't as blocked. I wasn't as in my own head, but my brain was, the mind is like a parachute. It works when it's open. And certainly my mind was very much open after this. I remember very little about my infancy or childhood, but one moment in particular stands out. I write this in my book where I was, in preschool next to a classmate. I was seeing spirits all around the classroom. I looked at the classmate and I could see, do you see what I'm seeing? The classmate just looked at me with this incredibly bewildered look. And I just knew like I was alone in this. And the adults around me just did not understand what I was experiencing. There was no words to it. But like recently, my father, who's also a therapist, told me that I came up to him, and I'm just using paraphrase language here, but I said, hey, Dad, remember when I was rushed from the ambulance to the hospital? Something happened on that day. One day that will make sense to you, but for now it won't. And so I kept it very much quiet to what happened to me. But things like premonitions were happening at a happenstance. Like I would see things, hear things, know things before they happen. They would occur before me, and I was just quite annoyed. It was more of a nuisance than anything else. I just wanted to live my life, but I had all this awareness of things to come, and they would come, and I'd be like, this is really annoying. I just want to live. And so I kind of blocked it out. I tried my best to just bury it, like putting a beach ball down and as far as you can in the ocean, but eventually that beach ball just has to rise
Mm,
up. Its nature is to be above water and to float. And within timing, once I was able to develop a lexicon and a verbiage for what all these things were, as well as the understanding of the universality behind it that other people had this, it wasn't just me, it really opened up a lot more ownership versus seeing this as a tremendous burden and something that I was just running away from.
mm. Premonition wise, how many did you have, or how many are you still having? I mean, that's an example, right? So you're 33 now. You're three when you had your NDE. Were there like 10 within that period, and then there's a 10 to come?
It's hard to like put a finger on it, but it wasn't just like good things. It would oftentimes be like warning things. Like, I just remember being, and I grew up, for instance, Orthodox. I grew up Orthodox Jewish, and we kept like, religious laws. And so I remember going with a friend after a baseball game. We went to Domino's Pizza, and I just decided to go way back in the bathroom. I just went to the bathroom, and once I was in the bathroom on my screen, I just saw my dad walking into Domino's, talking to my friend, having a conversation. I didn't hear a word. I was all the way in
Mm,
the back of Domino's. I opened up the door, and somehow my dad was able to find us through driving around the streets around town. We were on the other side of town, and somehow he found us within that restaurant. Stuff like that would happen all the time. Or there was one instance where like a kid like called me overweight when I was younger, and then all of a sudden I saw like this kid like dying in a car accident. And then, when he was younger.
mm,
And then I was on my way to work on a Saturday morning. The road was totally blocked off. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I was getting all flustered. A couple of hours later, maybe like a decade later, I found out from what I saw in that moment that that was the same kid, that I
mm,
saw. And I was there 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, the morning of that scene. So there's just a lot of that kind of stuff. The fact that I saw that I was driving on that road 10 years later in the middle of nowhere, just kind of freaky stuff that you just can't explain. The probability of me being on that road at 7 o'clock in the morning, right after this kid, just,
mm.
and I saw that a decade earlier. You can't explain this stuff. And so,
No, and it's also it's not like one thing because one of them, your first story, seemed a bit inconsequential or trivial. You know, just
right,
somebody coming into a Domino's
right.
restaurant, and then the second one where something big has happened that does impact your life. If it was like all big things, you could almost understand it. But why is it just random small pictures?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's really a matter of tuning in. I think we're all aware on one level of things that are happening or going to happen as time is not what we see it as. It's kind of like, you ever hear like a faint radio in the background and you're talking to someone maybe, and then you stop talking to someone, you listen to that faint radio. Intuition is kind of like that radio, noise that's going on in the background. Life is happening, but you just kind of tune into it. You're aware of it, and then you're like, then it happens. You're like, geez, I saw that. I was there, and then it's in front of you. You just kind of know it. And I think we've all had intuitive moments. For instance, we're thinking of someone in our head, and then all of a sudden that person calls us, or we're
Mm.
thinking of that person, and then all of a sudden we hear something about that person out of nowhere. So, it's all just kind of like neurologically connected with their own brainwave frequencies and thought energy, that we're all just kind of like a part of that we don't realize, as we just kind of see ourselves as just this box that are just not picking up on, all of this information around us.
Is there any big premonition of yourself in your life that you know of that hasn't come true yet? That you know it's quite big.
That has not come true.
Yes.
Um,
Yet.
well, for instance, in my near-death experience, I definitely saw myself committing a life to speaking in front of a lot of people, and I've done that. But I also saw like a big auditorium, and so I went to a yoga class one day, and this random woman came up to me, and she was able to tap into that too. I didn't know her. She said, "You're going to be very well known. You're going to speak in front of a lot of people, and I see you speaking in front of like a big auditorium," which is really cool.
Mm.
And now this August, I'm speaking in a big auditorium in Phoenix, Arizona, in front of over 1,000 people. So this August, that premonition to a degree will come true. I've done auditoriums before, but this is like a big
A
time
big
event.
one,
We
yeah.
have, people like James Van Prague there, some of the biggest,
Oh yeah, big
names
name.
in the business, and I'm, one of the presenters there. So uh, that's like one thing, that I've kind of touched a little bit on, but like directly, like a big auditorium like that was something that I saw as a kid. Um, but I think there's a lot of debate of destiny and free will, and so I think, in a way, we all have a certain degree of destiny that we chart before we get here. But at a certain point, we have free will to really divert from that and do differently, or to stay on that, and that's, our free will to a degree. So yeah, there are things that are calling, me to a degree, like personal things, but there's a part of me that's still stubborn that doesn't want that. So, I understand that it could happen, but I have to, you have to go forward with it.
So
The
what you're saying
opportunity
is
could be
there
there,
might
but
be things that you could change. Then is what you're getting at. There's other things you've seen that you think I'm going to avoid that.
yeah, there are things that I know are a big possibility that I
Okay.
have seen, but I'm kind of delaying that for whatever reason, but we'll see. Yeah, it's up to me if those things come true or not.
Well, I hope it's not a negative thing for your life.
No, no, positive, positive
Good.
stuff.
Oh, good.
Positive. Yeah.
Okay, is one for you, and I don't know how we answer this, but does God exist?
Does God exist?
Hmm.
Very, a lot of people are asking that, especially today with everything going on, it almost seems like we live in a world without a very godless world.
Mm.
Um, I look at God and spirit, kind of like Wi-Fi in a way. When you tune into it, it works, and your life, is connected to a higher realm. It's always there. We just simply have to connect. And so God is in all things. And to me, what is the essence of God? To me, God's eternal, God's a creator, God is love. God is not wrath or judgment or hate, or all those things are more of separation. They're not in unity consciousness of the divine. So God exists as much as we're able to embody it, remember it, and to see it and live it. What I like to call the living from the lens of the God lens in our life, seeing the world through that God lens. And so the deeper we tap into our own spirituality, our own awareness, the more that we're able to really embody, understand, God. But I think people get caught up when they have a set definition of God, that's been handed to them or that they think in their own minds as God. And so that becomes a stagnant God. God's eternal, God's not stagnant. So I think each day is a new opportunity to have a better understanding, a better expansion of our awareness of the divine.
Here's a thought that just popped my mind while you were answering that. They say that our mind is a very powerful tool and it creates things. Yeah, our consciousness, it creates the world that we live in. Our consciousness creates scenarios that we're put in, etc., etc. Do you think our consciousness created the God?
That our, well, certainly the word it did, and
Yeah,
certainly
yeah, the
belief
word, but did it
systems it
create the
did.
being?
I think in a way we're more so the experience of God. The lives that we live are just God experiencing life through us. We're all of God's experience. There's a great quote by a Holocaust survivor named Elie Wiesel, who said, Nobel Peace winner, who said, "We are God's stories. We are the stories of God." And
I
so I
see.
think
Yeah.
the lives that we live are just God's stories. We want to make a beautiful one. But in terms of the conceptualization of it, that's certainly man-made and created, I think within, certainly religions and stuff like that. Um, I do feel that God may be in a Bible, but to me, God is bigger than a book. God is bigger than a Bible. I think a Bible or a particular book just gives us a premise of maybe an understanding of God, but also there's a lot of human factors that go into the Bible that just, to me, do not align with the God that I saw in my NDE and the God that I know. So I
Hmm.
think there's a kernel of truth within every particular faith base, of the divine, but sometimes people get so extreme and knee deep into that they can't really connect to something beyond what they were taught.
Has that answers? Sorry, that opens up a further question. Then, has anyone on this earth written a book or put into religion or anything what we would class as the best portrayal of a god that you saw or that you're aware of and know? Have we managed to capture 99% of that eternal being in thought, or can we not do it?
I think our words are certainly our best expression that we have here. But certainly words are finite expressions and symbols and in language. God to me is uh, beyond words, beyond what we have to do. But certainly from an intellectual pursuit and understanding God, I feel there's been a lot of authors that have been able to encapsulate God, particularly near-death experiencers and their descriptors of God as an unconditional being of love, of light, of acceptance. Um, I think there's been pivotal teachers throughout time. I mean, people like Neil Donald Walsh, for instance. I think he, in his conversations with God, talks about a God that's very much personal, that each person connects to. I think within religions, it gives like a general macro framework, but it's not very personal. And to me, God is personal. God is an intimate relationship that each person has with its own creator. But it's really rooted in love and compassion. But I think we all are conversing with God. We're all having a dialogue with God at all times. We don't just know it. In the depths of our thoughts and our worries, our concerns, we're constantly, engaging, and having a discourse with God, and we don't really know it. But to me, it's just that voiceless voice that we don't really
The
identify.
voiceless voice.
That's
No, that's a
that's
good
always
phrase.
that's always a part of our journey that sometimes not everyone is able to see as God. But I think there's a lot of modern day teachers that are able to really reframe a lot of the stigmatization or just poor relationships that many have with that term of God, to have some space for healing and a new interpretation of God.
Yes, there's loads more questions that have come to mind there, but I'm not going to go into them because I'll just sidetrack this with loads of because
Right.
each one branches out to like 10 different questions and stuff. But I have one that I've written down, which is what is the difference between mind, body, and spirit, and how do we know which one is which? I know that sounds silly, but
No, not at
you
all.
understand.
Yeah. I think in a way, I call it the Holy Trinity of our experience. The mind and our body and our spirits, they're all a part of our journey. And when we're connected, with all of them, our lives take a whole new angle. I think a lot of people may be imbalanced when they're just in their mind or just in their thoughts or they're just in their body, they're just connected to physical, or they're just connected to spirit and they're not grounded. And so I think it's important to understand that each one has a relationship and synergy with the other. And when you're connected to all parts of those, that's all a part of your being. What you don't take with you is your body, obviously. Your body, is just put underground or put into ashes. It's not something you take with you, but you do take your spirit and you do take in a way, your own mind as, thought energy continues, but it's a lot more imbalanced. And when people go to the other side, oftentimes, their own conditions tend to dissipate and heal. Meaning if you have schizophrenia or mental health conditions, like those do not, continue. There's healing that goes on, over there. So, um, I think though they're all related, and there's certainly, as we know, a dynamic of mind, body, spirit. The mind affects the body, and the spirit affects the body too. They're all intertwined and interconnected.
Here's one for you, which I'm sure you'll know or at least have an idea of.
Right.
If I die today, right, and the essence of me, Koit, Paul, whatever you want to call me, my character, my personality, is does it go with my spirit? So like my spirit now has spirit plus Koit, and then
Oh,
that
I see.
becomes the new spirit, and then the next life is Dave, say, and then he dies, and it's now spirit plus Koit plus Dave. Is that how it works? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lives that we live are kind of like accumulation of a book. Um, each life we live is a different chapter of that book. It's just a part of this mixture of who we are. I think we're in many ways the full totality of a lot of lives that we live. Um, it's interesting because you kind of ask, you could go down a rabbit hole, but for instance, let's say people cross over and they go to the other side, and many times they come through evidentially in a reading, they're doing the same things that they're doing on the other side, and there's evidential pieces of this. And that's
Mm-hmm.
been happening. We see this time and time again. To me, the afterlife is, in many ways, we are about a lot of the things that we're about in this life and beyond. And so who we are, our essence, we'll pick up some of those hobbies, we'll continue some of those things. But who we are is, uniformly connected throughout lifetimes. It's just our essence, and sometimes it's expressed differently. It's like an actor. You take on a different role, but at the end of the day, it's just a part of who you are, and it's not the full totality.
So I'm a costume essentially, ain't I?
It's a state. Well, William Shakespeare said it best. I mean, this is like a stage. It's like a
Mm,
theater of our lives. So, each life we live is a different scene, but beyond that, it goes on. And sometimes we gravitate maybe stronger to certain lifetimes or certain experiences, and maybe less to others that we could just let go of. And so sometimes within lifetimes, we hold on to things a little bit stronger than others. And I think it's all a matter of what the soul really gravitates to or decides to declare itself as,
mm.
throughout its experiences.
Now I'm glad you mentioned that Shakespeare thing because I was pondering on that about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Right.
When I wake up in the morning, I like to lie there for half an hour and ponder things. It's good to have that
Yeah.
time, by the way,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everyone should
Yeah.
do it. But my question was, in my mind at that point, I wonder if in history, let's just take the 16, 1700s or whenever he was about, um, that they knew all this properly, all this, they knew what the afterlife was and stuff, but we've sort of like our modern life has clouded it and we've lost that knowledge. I wonder if that's the case.
Well, I mean, you look at some of the great thinkers of time, they seem to be very well connected to this stuff. So I think it's not like all of a sudden, because the internet exploded and people started writing books, that the afterlife started to exist. I think it's been
Mm,
more mainstreamed and it's been able to have an opportunity to be expressed beyond a religious depiction, through the freedom of thought and, the lack of persecution. But it's not like all of a sudden, we're in 2023 and all of a sudden the other side is now just there, over there. It's always been there. I think just maybe sometimes throughout times, more or less people are more or less connected to it. I think the spread of awareness is a lot more with people for a plethora of reasons, like I said, as there's a possibility of an afterlife that goes beyond just, purgatory and heaven and stuff like that, and something that we could connect to beyond a set belief system,
mm,
externalized. So, it's like, I don't know, let's say you're going through a gallery reading and a medium is there, and all of a sudden your loved one shows up. Your loved one just decides to show up because it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and that medium is there. And that's what made the connection. The connection was always there. So the same thing with the afterlife. It's just the afterlife is always there. We just have to connect to it. It becomes a part of our reality. But in terms of theory, I think it's always been connected to. Um, it's not something new. I
mm.
think maybe it may be expressed differently depending on our cultures and our language and our vernacular, but it's the infinite and it's always been a part of our experience, here.
Hmm. I wonder if it's like a sine wave, where the humanity has an awareness, a great awareness in a certain period of time, then it drops off for whatever reason, then back again, like that, up and
Yeah.
down. And I wonder.
Well, I think our microcosm is a macrocosm. And so within our own lives, I mean, certainly our connection to spirit is like phases of the moon. I mean, sometimes it's a full moon, we're fully aware. Other times it's a crescent, we're really not, and other times it disappears. And so at times as a collective, and we looked at certainly our patterns within time and a lot of our behaviors where we've been very much disconnected as a civilization. And sometimes we find,
Hmm.
that we're more connected throughout, our lives, much like individually, when we're on this path, there's moments when we feel more of a connection and sometimes, less, but the connection is always there. And it's not like linear, like one-way trajectory up. Sometimes it has its hills and valleys, as you said.
Yeah, I agree. A lot to ponder on there again. Is all the day to day stuff that surrounds us pointless? Yes or no? And if not, what is it there for?
I think it's as pointed or as pointless as we make it out to be. I think, we could look at it as certainly trivial and experience life through that lens, or we could see it all as a part of sacred journey. I mean, some things in our life are just a part of getting from point A to point B. But things have a lot more depth and meaning where there's a degree of presence and awareness. I mean, filling up your gas tank, is that um, a meaningful thing? Well, now obviously it can be with climate change, so maybe a bad example, but
I know what you mean, though. A
some
task that
things
you
we
have to
just
do. Yeah.
some things are just kind of like going through the motions of the oceans. But I found when you're able to kind of like experience awareness, experience presence, and all those things, the things that you might have seen as small deals are really big deals, and just sometimes the things that are big deals are small deals. It's all a matter of connectivity and how present we are in our lives that really define the full expression of its beauty.
Thank you. Now, I'm conscious of time because we've only got a little bit left, so I'm going to run through the question I ask everyone before we enter the
Sure.
Koit zone. The question I always ask everyone is, what strange things have happened to you? And obviously, you can't mention your NDE and you can't mention your premonitions because we discussed that already. But is there a scenario in your life? It could be a UFO, an alien, a random weirdo in your life that you've met us on the stage. Anything you want.
Um, I think the strangest thing in my life that happened, even beyond the near-death experience, was a profound out-of-body experience,
Ooh.
which under the umbrellas of near-death experience, probably around 70% of them have out-of-body experiences, not all. But I was, in I believe my first year of community college, and I just woke up one day and I was out of my body. And I think a lot of things led to it. Um, I just remember the night before that, I just remember laughing hysterically at how serious I take, myself or this body or things. And sometimes you could laugh and it's a very superficial laugh, but this laugh, I could feel all parts of my body just squeezing out all the tension, all the stuff, all the pain, and just let out all this, emotion. And I know what a manic phase is, and I know what a bipolar episode is, and a psychotic episode. Yeah, this was not it. This to me was a profound spiritual, transformative experience where I was literally out of my body for several weeks. I experienced my own energy centers, my chakras, my animal totem that I was able to really see. It was the most beautiful, profound moment of my life that lasted for quite some time. And, to me, I could say, okay, you're just 3 years old, you're hallucinating, whatever. But then I had this, as a young adult, I was like, this is real, and I just remembered this occurred in September, around 20 years after I had my first near-death experience. There's something within September in my life that's always been a profound
Mm.
point. But, I've read, like we are one, we are this, we are that. And so it's just kind of like a nice thing, but it goes one ear and out the other. Within my out of body experience, I was able to be in a synagogue and I just saw this one strand of energy that connected, all of humanity to each other. But I also saw how everyone was just kind of like in their own box, in their own head, and they lacked this awareness of this connectivity and just reminded me of how we all are a part of this oneness. We just simply have to remember it and integrate it. And so to me, life is not about the intellectualization or what we know. It's about the application, integration of what we know within this life.
Some thoughts there. Now, a question that comes to mind on this: you're the first person I've ever heard say you've been out of body for that length of time. Normally,
It was
it's
a
just
long
like
time.
a bit of time. So, where were you? So, say this is your body. Were you just sort of like above yourself, or
I
that sort of
was I
thing?
was above myself and I could feel my essence expanded far beyond my body. Like I was
Whoa.
walking on the ground and I could just see myself floating above the trees and connected to, all these things that we're a part of. And so it just was out of this kind of box, like this point of a pen that we're all kind of in. And I just was able to see myself as expanded beyond this reality. I even saw myself as ceilings looking down at things, and there wasn't anything that contributed to that. I wasn't clinically dead. I didn't have a near-death experience. I wasn't experimenting at hallucinogenics.
Hmm.
Nothing. To me, why it happened, I can't fully say. It's sometimes it's like a lobster suit that we wear, and sometimes we have these upgrades or these kind of new suits to wear within our lives and these new chapters. And to me, I was just kind of getting into a new phase in my life, and maybe I kind of needed to have this experience to take ownership of my near-death experience and stop questioning myself and to recognize that this is
Mm.
real. And without a
Another
shadow of a
learning
doubt,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, this was real.
Could you obviously you're sensing your awareness of your bigger self, if you will, out there and up above. Were you also feeling your body at the same time?
At times, but not the way that I do. I was feeling my
Okay.
body, but more so through my energy centers. And
Okay.
so when we think of energy centers, they're called chakras, which is just Sanskrit for spinning kind of discs or wheels that we have. And so when I was feeling my body, I was more so just feeling my chakras. And these energy centers were just exploding. I could feel, for instance, my eyeball. I could feel it right in the middle of my forehead, but it was just blinking very slowly on and off. And my heart and my eye felt like wetter than an ocean, where literally I took a towel because I thought I was soaking wet. And I tried to dry myself, and there wasn't anything there. And
Hyper
so
awareness sort of thing, yeah.
it was just like, I couldn't believe that, when this early was starting, that there was no liquid around me. I felt like I was like just jumped out of a pool. And so I was also aware of elements. For instance, we have earth, air, fire, water, ether. And so, I mean, for instance, in the English language, we say, all right, I'm hot-headed. What does that mean? Really, that just means our fire energy is in our head and we're thinking too much and the fire is up. And to be cool-headed, we have to bring the water up, the fire down. And so for myself, I really was able to feel this incredible fire that was down towards my lower back, and I could feel flames. Literally, my lower back, I almost wanted to get the fire department. It was like exploding. And then I felt this like ocean wave in my head. So essentially, the energies were balanced, and it just was like reminded me of how much beauty and how much depth we all have inside of us. We just have to simply connect to that. Have I connected fully like I have in that experience? No, I never, touched the ankles of that, but I've had glimpses of it. Sometimes it's depressing because I want that back at all times, but it reminded me, kind of like an orange, when you squeeze an orange out, what do you get as orange juice? When you take ourselves and what do you squeeze out is an infinite, magnificent, divine being that goes far beyond our limited belief systems and, um, just kind of very far off basis of how we see ourselves in reality.
Whoa, what a story that one is. I'd love to talk more again on that one, but that's, again, another wide topic.
Right,
And I want to quickly wrap up with the Koit zone. So, Jacob, you are now entering the Koit zone.
right.
Koit zone! Now, in the Koit zone, I just ask you inane, random, and banal questions. So answer best you can and as
Sure.
quickly as you can. Best type of bread?
I would say garlic, herbs, and cheese
Okay,
is the type of bread that I have. Yeah.
fair play. If you could be an animal for a day, which would you choose and to experience what?
A wolf and just the beauty of nature.
And would you howl at the moon?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you would.
I connect to the wolves, or I would say a wolf, and then sometimes an eagle, just to get out and be
Yeah,
free.
the flying bit is always
Uh,
things that people are after. Favorite film?
Oof, putting me on the spot here. I would say it's not. I don't think it's anyone else's favorite film but mine, but I would say the movie Big Fish. I don't know if you ever seen that,
I have seen.
but
Is that the
but but
Ewan McGregor one?
I forget the actor, but essentially it's about a man who's about to die and he kind of goes over his whole life and the impacts that he has. So for me, that's a movie that speaks to the essence of life and the impact of life that we could have on people and how really the measure of our life is a measure of our relationships, our experiences. And so it rings true with a lot of spiritual truths.
I know I have seen it, but I'm going to look that up again.
It doesn't have
Is
a
there an elephant in it?
there's a lot. I mean, there was like a circus. I know Danny DeVito is
Yeah,
in
I
it. He
think
played
there's an
like a
elephant in
small
it.
role. Probably doesn't get the best reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, but to me, it's a movie that speaks to me. I'd say that's a movie that sticks out as I can't say it is my favorite, but it's certainly one of my favorites that aligns itself with spiritual truths.
Well, I will also say this: it came to your mind first, so it tends to be
Yeah,
the right answer, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Bacon, crispy or floppy?
Crispy.
Yeah, you've joined the good gang on that one. What computer game were you or are you best at?
Well, I would say back in the day when I played computer games, I was a sports guy. So the backyard sports games, backyard football, backyard baseball. These are games kind of played with like kids, and they had just personalities. Some of them were handicapped and stuff like that, and I just loved the inclusivity of the game. And so that's a game that I played as a kid a lot.
No, fair play.
I've
I
always
don't
been
know
a
the one, but
I've
good
always
on you.
been a big I've always been a big sports guy. Yeah.
Excellent. Favorite board game?
Uh, Monopoly.
Okay. Do you have an addiction?
Yes, it's a very random addiction, but fragrances. I am a fragrance snob, not just run-of-the-mill designer level. I like very unique scents, and so for me, having near-death experiences and taking all those heightened sensory experiences, I'm drawn to fragrances as those kind of give me just a connectivity to the higher realms and a different expression for each day. So to me, fragrances are one of my biggest passions in this life.
Have you heard of that new one they just released called Essence of Skunk?
I haven't. I haven't. No,
Try looking for that.
yeah, more so higher designer levels and niche fragrances and stuff like that. But I think the fragrance that people gravitate to says a lot about the personality and who you are. And
Hmm.
so, I think more exotic personalities like more the exotic scents, more the exotic music. People are kind of middle of the road. They'll like, crowd pleasing music or scents and stuff like that. So we behave in many ways with our energy, how we are. Our energy attracts the things that we gravitate to.
Wow, I've never met anyone who likes fragrances, so cool.
Love it.
Favorite weather?
I am probably 75 degrees and partly cloudy and sunny. I love mid 70s. I'm not a winter guy. I'm not an extreme guy. Something, 70 to 75 is my cup of tea.
Just pleasant, we'll call it.
Yep.
Is there a song lyric that you always thought you knew, but later on you found out you were singing it wrong all the time?
I think every song lyric. I'm not a lyric guy, so for me, I probably botch almost every song. I more so take in the energy of the song, not so much the lyrics. But lyrics, as we know, are subliminal and they have more of an impact than we know.
Hmm.
But I think really I'm more of an empath and more of a feeler. So when I take in the song, it's like if it sounds good to me, it's good. But then sometimes some songs that you like are just the most vindictive, vendetta-esque songs. And when you listen to their lyrics, like, geez, and most popular songs have no essence to them or no soul to them. They're just about getting back at someone and burying
Hmm.
them. They sound very upbeat and good. And then you listen to it like, geez, I'm not sure I like that song. So once I do, I try not to do research on songs because then I oftentimes don't like them anymore.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Now you've just raised something in my mind, and I hope you give me 1 minute just to explain this out. But songs, right? I seem to get messages in songs, and I know that sounds weird, but if I need to parse out something in my life, I need to do something,
Mhm.
a song will come to me with the lyric that tells me the answer to what I need.
Oh, very, very common. You're not alone in
Mm.
that. I
Oh,
don't mean
wow.
to say that. I don't mean to say that you're not unique,
No, that's
but
fine.
signs and symbols come through loud and clear in songs oftentimes. And oftentimes when we're listening to songs, our brain is kind of more relaxed. We're not trying to force life to come to us. It just kind of, it's like feeling a breeze from a door opening. We just kind of let it come to us, or a gentle tap on the shoulder, and we're like, oh my God, that's kind of it. And so oftentimes we don't try to force things, they're always there and it just comes to us a lot easier and more gentler. But that's
Mm.
very happens to a lot of people. Yeah.
I'm glad then, in a way, because I always thought it was just me, but that's cool. Last question in the Koit zone. You've just won $1 million for a charity of your choosing. Who are you giving it to, and why?
That's a good one. I would say probably world hunger for kids, for, just very impoverished situations. That's probably where I would go with it is world hunger. Nothing worse than just not being able to eat your next meal and not being able to feed yourself. So that's probably where I would go. But there's endless pain in life and there's endless needs of life to give yourselves to. It would be hard to gravitate to one, but I would say if anything, food is what keeps us going. Without it, we can't survive. So, you know.
Again, it's a lovely sentiment, Jacob. I was a bit disappointed that you didn't say the Koit Foundation. I obviously need to work on my marketing.
I have to read more on that, but
Yeah.
sure, that too.
Yeah.
Why not?
Okay, thank you. That's the end of the Koit zone. Two final questions. The first thing, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures?
Hmm, that's a good one. I'm an 80-20 guy where 80% of my life is about discipline, 20% is just doing whatever. So for me, I'm kind of boring, but I'll have like a lot of ice cream if I have earned it. I do love Nutella. I'm a big Nutella guy, even though it's not authentic from Italy, whatever. I love hazelnut kind of spread pizza, Achilles heel. I love in my downtime, definitely a lot of exercise. I'm very active. I'm a long distance runner.
Oh, whoa.
Um, I try to run around 6 miles a couple times a week. Love to take walks in the woods, although the winter is tough to do that. So those are the kind of things that I like, and I'm a big sports guy, so I follow sports pretty non-religiously. But yes,
Amazing. And the final question, what are you currently working on?
what am I working on? Just finding ways to stay as connected as I can. I think there's a balance between the outer work and the inner work, and I find that as my inner work is better, my outer work improves. And so for myself, I've been doing a lot more self-care, as cliche as that sounds, trying to eat better, exercise more, meditate more. But definitely a third book is what I really want to do. But it has to really come to me as
Oh, you
I've
haven't
written.
chosen the topic yet.
It's coming to me. But my goal is really a third book with probably a bigger publishing house and trying to get out the message as much more as I can. But an idea that I have is really the emergence of mental health and spirituality, and how the two can really work in partnership and not, be
Hmm.
separate entities. So that's something that I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's an angle I haven't seen before or heard of before. So yeah, that might be a nice little zone.
Yeah, yeah.
And on that note, by the way, everyone who's listening to this, if you've liked what Jacob have said, and I'm sure you will, there's a lot of been interesting stuff here. All the links in the description. Go and check them out. Yeah, go and buy his books if you find quality in it. Go and listen. There's lots more. Go and buy the stuff for Jacob. Okay, Jacob. Thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for coming on the show. It's much appreciated.
A big honor. This is a terrific conversation, and I hope viewers enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you kindly. Okay, goodbye, everyone.
I know.
To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.